I'm 72 years old with a minimum wage job and $70,000 in debt. You know, I talk a lot about on this channel how to prevent ever making it to this situation, but some people are already at this stage in their life. And I found this story and I wanted to talk about what happens when you get here and kind of what your options are. I always find it fascinating to see all different types of financial situations, especially the bad ones like this, and what can be done, if anything, to dig yourself out. And there's a lot of little lessons that can be learned, especially if you're younger and you're nowhere near 72 years old and you still have time to course correct. So much of what I talk about here on the channel is about learning from other people's mistakes. And obviously, if you're in this situation at 72 years old, you probably made a lot of financial mistakes along the way. And anybody who is younger than this can prevent making a lot of those mistakes just by listening to this. So this person says, I'm 72 years old with no savings. I'm still working a minimum wage job and paying for 2 trailers for my daughter and I on my credit card, which means I'm financing about $70,000. We also have to pay for parking for the trailers, insurance, and registration. Last but not least, my health is becoming more and more questionable, and I could end up in a wheelchair. So it sounds like this person is living in probably a very poor area in the country, in a trailer park, paying for 2 separate trailers for her and her daughter. Why the daughter isn't helping out at this point, I don't know. She didn't say, but that definitely should be the case, especially when your mom is this old and working this hard to keep you with a roof over your head. So the professional response to this situation is as follows. At this stage, it is now less about investing and more about survival planning. The first step is to stop digging the hole deeper by addressing the credit card debt. And I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. You know, high interest debt will bury you financially. So looking into credit counseling or a nonprofit debt management program could help consolidate or reduce payments. They say it's also important to explore any government benefits you might be eligible for, like Social Security payments, Medicaid, or housing assistance given this person's age, and maybe even something like Section 8 to help out with the house payments, which could even result in free rent. You could also be eligible for food stamps or utility discounts. Also, they say you should explore state programs that may be available for you in the form of SNAP benefits to rental assistance or even utility subsidies. Some states have programs for these type of services. But the main thing that this person should be doing is looking at reducing their spending. You know, why do you need to have 2 separate trailers for you and your daughter if it's just both of you? Consolidate, get rid of one of them, and just move into one together. And funny enough, the expert in this story also agrees with me and says, why isn't your daughter helping out with the bills and the finances and helping to generate some income? You know, why are you the only one at 72 years old paying for everything? Obviously, parents always have the best of intentions with their children when it comes to helping them out financially. But let's face it, guys, if you're 72 and still paying for your adult kid to live somewhere, your kid's a deadbeat. And when you're going into massive amounts of debt just to be able to pay for this, all while your health is on the decline, it really just kind of shows you how much your kid actually cares about you if they're willing to let you kind of flush your financial life and your health down the toilet, also they can have a free place to live. Honestly, I don't care who we're talking about here. When any type of family member is willing to take advantage of you like that, you really have to do a double take and think twice about what you're doing. Also, they say, what about your daughter taking on some of these expenses herself? You know, not just contributing with the income, but also just paying for things on her own. How about that? What a novel concept. And so what I gather from this situation is there's not really a whole lot you can do other than to kick your deadbeat family member to the curb and start worrying more about your own finances and your own physical well-being. Because you can only kind of go down that path for so long before you end up hurt, you end up in the wheelchair, and now you can't earn, and now you're both going to get kicked to the curb because no one's generating any income or producing anything. And so if I'm a younger person, which obviously I am, listening to this, you know, what would be some of the takeaways that I would grab from this story to make sure that I don't repeat the same mistakes? Well, the number one thing you could do is not have any kids, I suppose. But assuming you do have kids, raise them to be responsible adults. Teach them early on about finances and money, and give them incentives and reasons to want to go earn on their own. Give them a reason to want to get a job as soon as they can and learn about generating income and saving and buying things on their own. I used to love that when I was a kid, earning allowance money for doing chores around the house and, cutting people's grass and things like that. I used to love it when I had cash in my wallet. Even if it was like $20 or $30, guys, I felt rich. This is great. I can go buy a CD at the store without having to ask my parents for it. But besides teaching your kids about money from an early age, you can also do a lot of the things I talk about here on the channel. You can make sure you constantly live below your means. You don't take on any unnecessary debt. You're constantly looking at different ways to increase your income and have multiple sources of income. There's no reason that anybody who's done those steps alone at 72 years old should be working a minimum wage job, guys. If that's you, it's because you just made one bad decision after another throughout your life. You never improved your skills, your education, or anything. And that's the only type of job you can get because it's all you're qualified for. I would say it's actually very easy to not end up in this situation. And you really have to make a lot of mistakes in life to get this far down the road and end up this hard up financially. Now, there are exceptions, of course. People run into health issues or have big life events like a divorce and then a big health issue that can end up bankrupting people. I'm not saying stuff like that doesn't happen, but at least if you have some serious income generating skills that you developed over the years, you're going to be able to generate a significant amount more income than just minimum wage if you invested in yourself along the way.